the most spine-chilling horror film of 2024, Smile 2, has arrived to terrify audiences. A popular actress encounters an obsessive fan during a meet-and-greet event. While taking a photo, the fan repeatedly harasses her with obscene language. Sensing something was wrong, Skye breaks free in fear, and security forcibly removes the man from the event. However, before she can calm herself, the next fan in line appears and fills her with even greater dread. Skye can immediately sense that this fan's smile is far more unsettling than the previous one's behavior. The girl approached with a stiff, eerie smile on her face, moving mechanically. No matter what Skye says, she doesn't respond, continuing to stare at her with unblinking intensity. Unnerved, Skye hurriedly signs her autograph on the girl's shirt and urges her assistant to take the photo quickly, hoping to get rid of her. But during the photo, the girl doesn't look at the camera. She keeps staring directly at Skye and remains silent throughout. This unnerving encounter reminds Skye of a bizarre incident she experienced just the night before. The previous night, she received a text from her friend Lewis inviting her over. When she arrived, he cracked the door open suspiciously before yanking her inside with sudden force, demanding to know why she was there.
Your text said to come over!
Confused, Lewis checked his phone and realized he had never sent the message. Panicked, he told Skye he had no memory of inviting her. He admitted he'd been plagued by terrifying visions recently and couldn't distinguish reality from hallucinations. Skye assumed Lewis was joking and didn't take him seriously, but Lewis begged her to stay with him for a while, saying he couldn't be alone. Noticing his distressed state, Skye agreed to stay temporarily. When Lewis went into the kitchen, Skye realized he'd been gone a long time. Worried, she cautiously approached to check on him. Suddenly, Lewis ran out in terror, once again accusing her of being in the house. Before Skye could respond, Lewis froze, as if he saw something horrifying. But when Skye looked, she saw nothing unusual. The situation left her deeply uneasy. Lewis's scream abruptly stopped, as if his throat had been blocked. Skye ran to check on him. To her horror, Lewis's face contorted into a twisted smile,
Lewis?
causing her to stumble backward in fear. Lewis picked up the weight plate from the floor, raised it with a chilling smile, and smashed it violently into his own face. He continued until his face was unrecognizable, collapsing in a pool of blood. Though Skye was horrified, she fought through her fear and prepared to call the police, but she froze, realizing she had no way to explain what had just happened. Skye imagined how the incident would explode in the media, ruining her career. After much deliberation, she decided to act as if she had never been there and fled the scene. That night, Skye heard strange noises in her house. Turning on the lights revealed nothing unusual. She assumed the traumatic experience had left her paranoid and jumpy. The next day, she texted her best friend Gemma, asking her to stay over for a few days. But just then, Skye received an anonymous message asking if she had been at Lewis's house the previous night. She immediately realized there was a witness to the incident. While trying to figure out what to do, she heard the sound of something heavy falling behind her. Skye turned around nervously. She was certain she was alone in the house. In the mirror, however, she saw someone who looked like Lewis standing behind her. She turned around to check but found nothing unusual in the room. Looking back at the mirror, the figure appeared again. Terrified, Skye cautiously tilted her head, trying to see the figure's face. The figure mirrored her movements perfectly. Suddenly, she realized the entire experience was a hallucination. Hearing a noise, her assistant came into the room, unable to explain what happened. Skye lied and said she saw a spider. These repeated strange occurrences left her unable to concentrate on work. When she returned home, the fear intensified, and she begged Gemma to come over immediately to distract herself. Skye began playing the guitar, trying to create a sense of calm and fill the silence in the house, but a sudden shattering sound interrupted her. She rushed to investigate and found her water glass inexplicably broken on the floor. At first, she thought she might have accidentally knocked it over, but while cleaning up, she noticed an item of clothing lying on the floor. Skye recognized it as belonging to the creepy fan from earlier that day. Her signature on the garment confirmed it. Even more terrifying, as she followed her gaze further, she saw the floor littered with a pile of the fan's clothing. Before she could react, the hallway lights suddenly went out. In the darkness, she thought she saw a figure standing at the end of the hall. When Gemma arrived, the two women bumped into each other, startling them both. Skye scrambled to her feet and looked back. but the shadowy figure had vanished. The terrifying experience left Skye unable to let her guard down. She grabbed a decorative item as a weapon and cautiously searched the house, with Gemma nervously following behind. As Skye approached, she realized that not only had the shadowy figure vanished, but the scattered clothing had also completely disappeared. Even the broken glass had disappeared, and the water glass was perfectly intact on the table. Everything Skye had experienced was yet another hallucination. The bizarre situation left Skye completely bewildered. Hearing Gemma's concerned questions, she was grateful her friend had arrived. However, she distinctly remembered making the call just moments ago. The warped timeline left Skye even more confused and disoriented. Desperate for answers, Skye confided in Gemma, recounting everything that had happened in the last 2 days. Gemma suggested that Lewis's traumatic death might have shocked Skye into experiencing vivid hallucinations. She also pointed out that going to the police now would make things even more complicated. Skye currently had no better solution, so Gemma decided to stay with her for the time being, thinking she could finally get a good night's sleep. Skye lay down, but even deep into the night, sleep eluded her. No matter how much she tried to talk, Gemma gave no response. Slowly, Skye turned her head, only to see Gemma wearing that same eerie smile. Terrified, Skye fell off the bed. When she got up, she found the bed completely empty. It turned out everything she had just experienced was another hallucination, and just like before, time seemed to have slipped away as if she had lost memory of an entire night. She suddenly remembered she had an important event that day. It was a charity gala organized by an influential figure. Luckily, Skye made it in time and immediately began rehearsing. During the rehearsal, however, she noticed one of the backup dancers smiling eerily. Almost immediately, she felt a sharp pain in her calf and collapsed to the ground. Crying out in agony, the director quickly stopped the rehearsal and turned on the lights to investigate. Skye, furious, turned to scold the dancer but froze when she realized her leg was perfectly fine. Getting up, she demanded to know who had stepped out of place and injured her earlier. The director insisted he had been observing the entire time and that everyone had been in their correct positions. It dawned on Skye that her hallucinations were worsening and were now happening in front of large crowds. She rushed back to her dressing room to calm down, only to see her assistant leaving the room, also wearing that same haunting smile. Entering the room, Skye was horrified to find it in complete disarray. Unable to contain her anger, she flung the door open and shouted at her assistant. The assistant, confused and alarmed, denied everything. Elizabeth, her mother and manager, stepped in, pulling the she aside to calm the situation. Given that the assistant had been by her side all day, Skye became even more convinced her worst fears were true. Realizing her deteriorating condition, Skye decided she could no longer appear in public and begged her mother to cancel her appearance at the gala that evening. Elizabeth, however, firmly refused, reminding her that they had already promised to attend. Angering the host could have disastrous consequences. Left with no choice, Skye reluctantly took the stage. During her speech, she read from the teleprompter and invited the next guest to speak, but something felt off. The guest had died in a car accident a year ago. As Skye stared at the teleprompter in confusion, she saw the deceased guest stand up from their seat, smiling eerily. Horrified, Skye realized it was another hallucination. She shut her eyes tightly, willing herself to snap out of it. When she opened her eyes again, the figure was gone, but her strange behavior had been noticed by the audience. The host stumbled and fell off the stage, losing consciousness, while Skye had completely ruined the gala. The event was ruined, but Skye had no time to worry about her reputation. At that moment, she received another message from the mysterious individual, warning her of the danger she was in and offering to help. The message urged her to meet immediately. This time, Skye didn't hesitate and set off to meet the sender. She arrived at a bar and met the man, Morris. Morris explained that he didn't know Lewis personally but had traced the series of events back to him. When he found Lewis, the door had been left unlocked, and Lewis was already dead. It turned out that this eerie smile was part of a contagious curse. On the 7th day, the host would be driven to uncontrollable suicide, and the curse would then transfer to the last person who witnessed it, making them the new host. Morris had studied the curse extensively because his brother had been one of its victims. Determined to prevent more innocent deaths, Morris devised a plan to end the chain. The curse, Morris explained, functions like a parasite. If Skye were to simulate her own death, the chain would break, and the curse would die without a new host to latch onto. As a doctor, Morris assured her that the process would not endanger her life, but the extreme nature of the plan enraged Skye. She accused Morris of being insane, shouting at him,
You're nearly out of time. This thing's been feeding on you for 3 days already. It's already taking control of your brain, and pretty soon you won't even realize the ways it's manipulating you, and then it'll be too late to stop it. We have to go right now.
Their argument attracted the attention of other patrons in the bar, forcing Skye to flee in panic. But deep down, she had already started to believe Morris's words. Even more despairing, when she returned home, Gemma was nowhere to be found. Panicking, Skye began packing her belongings, intending to hide away for a few days. In the next moment, even though she knew it was just another hallucination, the vividness of the scene left her paralyzed with fear. It didn't take long for them to catch her, and Skye was quickly overwhelmed by the crowd. When Skye regained consciousness, she found herself in a hospital room. Elizabeth explained that she had been calling Skye repeatedly, and when she went to check on her, she found her unconscious at home. Skye had been in a coma for 3 days. Elizabeth assumed the pressure from the gala had been too overwhelming, so she cancelled all of Skye's upcoming appearances, advising her to rest and prepare for tomorrow's concert. But tomorrow marked the 7th day of the curse. Skye, horrified, insisted she couldn't perform, but Elizabeth became furious. Refusing to listen to her explanation, she berated Skye for even suggesting such a thing. Seeing her mother's cold indifference, caring only about money, Skye was filled with despair. Elizabeth suddenly smashed the mirror, picked up a sharp shard, and began advancing toward her. Terrified, Skye scrambled off the bed and attempted to flee, but as she reached the door, she was horrified to find the bloody shard now in her own hand. Turning back, she saw Elizabeth lying lifeless in a pool of blood. Panicked, Skye slapped herself repeatedly, trying to wake up, but this time it wasn't a hallucination, it was real. As she grappled with the reality of what had happened, a knock came at the door. Skye quickly ran to the door, blocking her assistant from entering. She then lied, claiming she wanted a drink, and quickly threw on a piece of clothing to cover the bloodstains on her body. Without wasting any time, she rushed out, intending to leave the place as quickly as possible. When she reached the first floor, she was startled to find the lobby filled with people, including police officers near the main entrance. Feigning calm, she made her way to the back exit. Just as she was about to leave, she ran into her assistant, who immediately noticed the blood on her clothes. Thinking Skye was injured, he shouted for help. Within moments, medical staff surrounded her. Acting quickly, Skye called out to a nearby officer and pretended to collapse into his arms, only to grab his gun and force the crowd to disperse. Skye managed to escape the hospital and make it outside, only to run into Gemma, who had come to check on her. At that moment, Skye had no time to explain. She ran to the roadside, hijacked a car, and set off to find Morris. Despite Skye's protests, Gemma insisted on coming along to ensure her safety. Hearing police sirens in the distance, Skye had no choice but to let Gemma in the car. She called Morris to confirm his location. Just as she was about to explain everything to Gemma, her phone began to ring. Terrifyingly, the caller ID showed that it was Gemma. Skye hesitantly answered the call, and an even more chilling voice on the other end apologized, saying she had just seen Skye's messages from days ago.
Spend the night? At my place?
What? I haven't been to your place in like a year.
Unable to distinguish reality from illusion, Skye realized that Gemma next to her must be a hallucination. The hallucination smiled eerily at her, sending Skye into panic. Shutting her eyes tightly, she willed herself to escape the nightmare. When she opened them again, the hallucination was gone. The death of her mother left Skye broken but resolute. When she finally met Morris, she handed him the gun, telling him to use it on her if their plan failed. She followed Morris into a dimly lit cold storage room. Morris explained that even in a simulated death, without immediate medical intervention, brain cells would begin to die within 2 minutes, leading to permanent damage. However, lowering the body's temperature could slow the process and buy more time. Just as they were about to carry out the plan, Morris suddenly said he needed to grab something and turned to leave the room. Feeling that something was wrong, Skye shouted loudly for help. Just then, a few drops of blood dripped from above. Alarmed, she looked up in horror, only to discover another version of herself on the ceiling. The next moment, as the figure appeared in front of her again, Skye grabbed a syringe and plunged it into herself. The monster shrieked in terror at her actions. However, Skye's vision began to blur, just as she thought she had finally stopped her doppelganger. She was horrified to realize she was still alive and the syringe in her hand had vanished. It turned out that Morris had orchestrated this hallucination for his own amusement. Panicked, Skye scrambled to her feet, only to find herself trapped inside a metal shell.
Break a leg out there.
Before she could react to the darkness, familiar mist began to pour into the chamber. The metal casing slowly opened, and a beam of light shone directly on her. To her shock, Skye found herself standing on stage at her sold-out concert, surrounded by a crowd of tens of thousands. Everything she had experienced before had been nothing but an illusion. After her struggles, Skye had made it to the 7th day in this chaos. As fans screamed and cheered around her, she collapsed to the ground in despair. A hushed silence fell over the venue. The audience watched as their idol suddenly fainted on stage. Her team rushed forward to check on her, but before they could reach her, Skye sat up again. Confused fans erupted in cheers once more, failing to notice the eerie smile now spreading across her face. She slowly raised the microphone in her hand. The next moment,